second. Okay, there we go. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is our April Food Assistance Provider Call. So I know we have some new faces here. So if everyone can just use the chat to introduce yourself, tell us your name, your organization, why you're here today, anything else you want to share with our group, so we know who is in the Zoom room with us. So if I don't know you, if you're new here, my name is Julia Grenfelt. I work with the Prince George's County Food Equity Council. We've been hosting these calls for a couple years now. And these calls are really just an opportunity to bring our food assistance provider community together to share resources and best practices and to connect with one another. So I will be facilitating our call today. We have Sydney Daigle, our FEC director, who's helping with notes and helping with the chat. Before we jump into our presentation, I'm just going to pull up our agenda on the screen to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about today. So bear with me. Okay, so if anyone hasn't taken a look at the agenda, here it is. So after this brief introduction, we're going to jump into a presentation on food safety. After this presentation, we will have some time for questions. And then we also always like to have a couple minutes at the very end for any community announcements. These are listed at the very bottom. So if we don't have time to go into them too in depth, just know that they're there. So please take a look at these community announcements. And then we'll try to wrap up by 2 p.m. I'm just going to jump around a little bit. Sorry for all the scrolling. Before we jump into our presentation, I just really briefly wanted to give you all an update on our call schedule. As you know, we host these calls on the first Thursday of the month. In May, we're going to shift our call schedule a little bit. We're really excited to host a kind of partner call with our friends at Montgomery County Food Council. So we're going to be hosting this kind of joint provider call with them on May 9th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And that's going to be focused on TFAP, and there's going to be a presentation with Capillary Food Bank. So we'll be sharing more information out to you all soon, but just know that there's a slight change in our call schedule. We are going to be using our standing call time on the first Thursday of the month. So that will be May 5th for kind of an informal discussion with any providers that are interested in just jumping on the Zoom line and joining us for a little bit of a chat and resource sharing. But it's going to be kind of an informal discussion. We won't have the standard presentation. So all of that we'll send out via email. So just stay tuned for that. But I just wanted to highlight it before we jump in. Okay, so I know that was a lot. We're going to go into our presentation now. We're really, really excited to welcome Shauna Henley, who is the Family and Consumer Science Senior Agent and Affiliate Agent in the Department of Nutrition and Food Sciences with the University of Maryland Extension and the University of Maryland College Park. So Shauna is here today to share a presentation on food safety and safe food handling for our food assistance provider community in Prince George's County, but I also know that we have some representation today from folks from surrounding jurisdictions and areas. So welcome, whether you're in Prince George's County or the surrounding area. We're super excited to have you here today. And we hope that this presentation is informative. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Shauna for her presentation, and I will stop sharing so you can pull up your slides.
Great, thanks, Julia. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some of the questions you have. The two goals I thought I would have around today's presentation is about providing some new ideas to help develop and maintain a food safety culture, as well as sharing some new resources to help keep the topic of food safety fresh to your employees as well as your volunteers. Feel free to unmute yourself if you need something clarified or if you need me to repeat something. I'm just going to hide the toolbar so everything is a little bit visually better for you all. So one of the things I like to tell people when I'm talking about food safety is that we know that germs are everywhere. Some of them are good. It's just a handful that are really bad in terms of human health. And it's really our job to anticipate what could lead to germs growing into a bigger problem. And then also knowing we are in control to help reduce, if not eliminate, some of these foodborne risks that we're concerned about. So the World Health Organization, they define foodborne illnesses as usually infectious or toxic in nature and caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites, or chemical substances entering the body through contaminated food or water. One of the things that we've heard a lot about are recalls. So some ways to stay up to date to recalls is downloading the FoodKeeper app that is sponsored by USDA. You can also subscribe to FDA's recall market withdrawals. So these are a couple of ways that you can stay informed and up to date with daily recalls. Another thing too that I like to tell people is that you're probably hearing about more recalls. That's not necessarily a bad thing or saying things are worse in our food supply chain. As time goes on, we all know that technology and science is improving. So a lot of these industries where you might be purveying some of your food items for your pantries and shelves are able to detect food that potentially could be contaminated, have a recall, get it off the shelf before it potentially could become a public health concern. So the advancement of science has been a good thing in terms of communicating potential issues with food recalls. Another thing when I'm talking to people about food safety is, what's your favorite meal? Maybe it's lobster, oysters, tofu and lentils, and you might have your dream meal in front of you, but the nutrition aspect could be gone if there's food contamination somewhere in that meal. So we want to make sure, again, that meals are nutritious, but we also want to make sure that they're food safe for everyone to enjoy. A lot of you, as you know, you're serving people that might be under the age of 5, older, so 60 years of age plus, pregnant, immunocompromised. So maybe someone has diabetes, maybe they have cancer, have gone through an organ transplant, and we know that these populations are more vulnerable to foodborne illness. We don't know how many pathogens it could cause to make someone really sick. It could be one, it could be hundreds, thousands, millions. So again, we want to make sure we're holding and handling food in the best manner from a food safety perspective as possible. And you'll see that if you visit CDC, you can get various posters in different languages that might be nice to have up around your facility and change out throughout the year. So again, I talked about food safety being a game of I Spy. If you see this picture, what would be some concerns that you would see?
The cat on the counter.
Yeah, not only do we have a cat on the counter, we also have a mouse on the counter. And we know
Yeah.
that pests and animals carry diseases. So one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit more is making sure that facility that's holding food, where food is coming in and out of, right, those receiving areas, again, keeping a good eye on making sure the grounds are in good condition to help mitigate any sort of pest infestation. And the other question that I wanted to ask folks was, what's the general attitude of either employees or probably more specifically volunteers when they hear about food poisoning or foodborne illness? Do they have like, oh, gross, that's not great? Or are there attitudes like, oh, this is going to be something boring to learn about? Let me open up the chat box. So hopefully people are pretty excited to learn about food safety all the time. And again, it's really about looking for what could be a food safety risk and making sure you and the rest of your team is doing what they can do within reason to reduce, if not eliminate, food safety risks. So again, if the risk was the mouse and the cat on the counter, some of the things that you could do with the facility is make sure that there's no high grass outside your building, because high grass or tall grass can be places for rodents to hide out. You also would want to make sure doors shut appropriately so they close all the way and there's no gaps underneath doors for insects and other pests to easily go in and out of your facility. So we talked about mitigating and eliminating risks. So one of the things that we like to talk about is hazards versus risks. And so typically with hazards, as you can see here, it's something that has the potential to harm you. So if you're at the beach and you saw a shark fin out in the distance, hopefully you're realizing that swimming with sharks could be a hazard, so you're not going to go swimming. Whereas a risk is defined as the likelihood of a hazard causing harm. So what would cause harm in that scenario would be swimming with the shark, even though you know the shark is there. So when we talk about potential hazards that could harm people, we know that food is generally classified as 3 hazards. You might have physical hazards, biological, as well as chemical. And some of the things to think about when you're looking at these 3 categories of contamination is that physical, hair, bugs, glass, wood, those are typically the gross factor. And we haven't seen a lot of cases where these physical items have caused foodborne illness. We just don't want them in our food because swallowing glass, swallowing wood could cause tears in the esophagus or possibly the stomach kind of thing. Technically bugs, right? Especially if you're thinking about houseflies, they could carry disease. So making sure screens, windows are closed, don't have holes in them, are a good thing to check on. In terms of chemical, that could include cleaners, heavy metals, even allergens. So one of the things that we're going to focus primarily on are the biological hazards, just because unlike physical and chemical hazards, you can't see bacteria, viruses, and parasites by the naked eye. So it's sometimes harder to conceptualize biological hazards when you can't see them yourselves. I do want to highlight that in terms of chemical hazards and allergens, the term that you're probably familiar with but want to educate volunteers on is cross-contact. So we know cross-contamination is the accidental introduction of foodborne pathogens into on a surface or into a food, where cross-contact is the accidental introduction of an allergen into a food product or even on a food contact surface. We are aware that in the United States, we have the main big 8 allergens, and starting in January 2023, sesame is going to be added as our 9th allergen. So that's something to keep aware of. When you are thinking about cleaning around allergens such as milk or wheat or soy products, we know that cleaning can help remove allergens. We also know that labels are critical, just because a lot of times if you or someone else you know might have a wheat allergy, the best way to prevent those symptoms is to avoid those food items. So it's going to be really important to make sure that any sort of labeling throughout your facility is well communicated, and that people that are helping to maybe clean a table after packaging meals do it well, so they're not leaving any visible pieces of a wheat cracker crumb or some of these other allergens, so they don't accidentally get into a new cycle of food production and packaging. The other big thing too is FATTOM. It's a nice little acronym. And anyone want to share briefly what the general story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears is? Feel free to unmute yourself. All right. So for Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we know that the bears, they come into a home and each bear finds a bed that is right for them. Each bear finds a porridge that is right for them. And bacteria are a lot like the three bears. Similar to people, we know that bacteria, they need food to grow. Some bacteria need to be in the right acidic or non-acidic environment. We know that bacteria like to grow in warmer temperatures under most circumstances, while a handful of bacteria can grow at refrigerated temperatures. And the ones that can grow at refrigerated temperatures is Listeria monocytogenes. We also know that bacteria can grow really rapidly, so that time and temperature abuse is something that we always want to keep in mind when delivering, transporting food, or even thinking about how long it takes to repackage food items as well. Some bacteria need oxygen to grow like we do or survive. Other pathogens, they need a little bit or very little oxygen to grow and survive. So we might be thinking about canned goods, very little oxygen. We know that botulism could be a potential issue with canned goods coming in. That might be canned green beans or canned meats. Similar to bacteria, people need water or moisture as well as bacteria. So when we're thinking about food safety, we're trying to manipulate the environment. So bacteria and other pathogens might have something that they need, but they don't have and can't survive to grow. So having that cooking step a lot of times will help kill pathogens, but also that kill step could also help with, again, we're looking at temperature, it helps kill things. It might also reduce food a certain way, so it makes it less viable for pathogens to grow on. So again, we talked about time. Bacteria can grow really fast if they have the right environmental conditions. So let's say you started your workday today. You had $1 in your hand, and we'll say that $1 is equal to 1 bacteria. By the time you're clocking out of work today after 8 hours, that 1 bacteria could multiply to close to $17 million. So again, we really want to make sure that we're controlling the environment to make sure bacteria can't proliferate to that many. We also know historically that there's some really popular pathogen food pairings. So the table on the left is looking at academic papers. The publication might be a little bit old, but we know that Campylobacter and poultry are a common pathogen food pairing. Similarly, we know that Salmonella and poultry is in that same pairing category. If you visit the CDC website, there's a lot of nice infographics like the one you see in the middle. And a lot of times people are surprised that when you look at produce, meats and poultry, dairy, fish and shellfish, it's that produce is seen to cause more illnesses than some of the other categories. And our rule of thumb from a food micro standpoint is that anything raw is risky. We talked about that kill step, that cooking that could kill pathogens because a lot of them can't withstand heat after a certain point. And we know that when we're accepting in canned goods, dry goods, they've all been processed to hopefully eliminate pathogens of concern. Whereas if we're taking in fresh produce and trying to hand out produce that's fresh, there's still that risk that that fresh produce could be carrying 1 bacteria, maybe more, that could make people sick. So if your facility takes fresh produce, turns it into soup or something else that has a heat step, you're greatly reducing a lot of risk that could potentially be on produce. But again, we really do have a safe food supply. So it's just doing these little extra pieces here and there that helps ensure the food going out to your clientele is high quality and also food safe. Another useful tool that you might find interesting is also with the CDC website, they have something called FoodNet Fast. And it's nice because you can actually go in, select the state of Maryland, and see what kind of pathogens are causing issues for certain age categories or race ethnic groups. So here's just a quick screenshot looking at Maryland for the whole age span of under 5 to over 65, looking at Listeria monocytogenes. And here we can get some quick stats about Listeria for all of Maryland from a certain time standpoint or even certain months. One website that you might find useful, they have a daily blog. It's called Food Safety News. And then one of the things that I wanted to share was this upcoming potential food recall on Lucky Charms. So there's a website called I Was Poisoned, and people can go there and share like, oh, I think this made me sick, that made me sick. And this website over the past few years has actually helped the federal government like the CDC and FDA and USDA hone in on potential food recalls or foodborne illness outbreaks that they might not have caught earlier. So for here, we see that during the past several days, hundreds of people have complained about stomach aches, vomiting, and diarrhea after eating Lucky Charms, one of General Mills's most popular cereals. The complaints have come from consumers in states across the country, and some of the consumers say their bouts of illness have lasted weeks. As of the posting of this article, there have been no official releases from General Mills, the Food and Drug Administration, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention about the complaints. So the blog, it's nice because it can keep you current on what could be coming down the track so you're not surprised, as well as help educate you in terms of maybe how to communicate some of the food safety concerns or risks with either volunteers or some of your clientele. And it's also nice too, because when we're thinking about the whole supply chain, you might be able to talk to some vendors where you're providing food about how they're staying current with potential recalls, actual recalls, and things of that nature. So we know food safety takes teamwork from the farm to the consumer, and all of you are doing bits and pieces in the middle from processing, transporting, maybe not so much retail. One of the things that we're seeing a bigger national movement towards is food safety culture. Some of the quotes that I really like around food safety culture is that culture is the way we do things around here. And one of the things that I'm hoping is that if your operations aren't moving towards this mindset of food safety culture, maybe it's a good time to start having people talk about food safety every day, right? I guess that would be my personal dream. Another quote that I really like is that when people are operating in a safe way, they're usually operating more confidently and carefully, which means they're operating in a way that will improve quality and reduce waste. So one of the reoccurring themes that I'll talk about a little bit later is making sure that your employees, your volunteers, they feel that they have the adequate tools to carry out what they need to do. It's oftentimes we've seen when people don't feel that they have all the necessary tools to carry out their activity, whether it's driving food out or collecting it, that's when people take the liberty to fill in those gaps. And when we fill in those gaps, we start seeing some errors that could lead to food safety risks. So when you're thinking about workers or volunteer training needs, again, you all know that you're working with different ages, people with a different knowledge set in terms of nutrition and food safety, and even culinary skills. So what I was hoping to do is just share some best practices in terms of how to train workers and employees, and then also think about refreshers throughout their tenure at your operation. So in terms of training, you really want to have it be short and simple. You can have a quick refresher or just show people what you want them to do in a reasonable amount of time. Again, if there's other case studies or other examples that you've seen related to a certain task, so maybe you have a driver and you can talk about making sure that when they go out to deliver food, that their vehicle is free of pet dander, pet hair, has been cleaned. These are great practices to help reduce contamination going into someone's household based off the packaging that they're delivering. We also want to make sure that you're including some hands-on and even one-on-one training just to make sure people are confident in what they're doing. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that volunteers as well as employees want to be doing the right thing because they're often wanting to help people in need. And you might even find and you may see that people have some really good ideas for effective training or even good ideas for how to carry out a certain activity that you might not have seen from your perspective. So in terms of food safety, education, and training, we know that the education piece is going to help answer why, and then the training is going to answer how to do it. A lot of times we will have people sit, lecture like we're doing here, but that's not going to help with making sure people are carrying out the right tasks in an appropriate manner. So that training piece, whether it's annually, refreshers right before people go about their tasks, are super important. The human factor. We are a lot dirtier than we think we are. So things to consider for employees and volunteers. Again, thinking about our hands. We know that hand washing is still the most effective way to prevent infectious diseases. We also want volunteers and employees to think about their nails. Are they wearing fake nails? Are they painting their nails? Do they have jewelry or watches that might have these small crevices where these bacteria can hide out and hang and grow over time? Making sure that people that come in and handle or transport food are clean, right? We know that contamination can occur because people's clothes are dirty. And we're also seeing more cases, especially in the farm area, where we want to look at footwear. So even thinking about, depending on your operation, appropriate footwear. Are you having people put little booties over their shoes so that their treads don't cross-contaminate things? Or are there other ways that you can potentially reduce some of those risks of footwear bringing in contamination into your facility? We know that we want to help train people not to touch their face, their hair when they're handling food. And if they do, those are times when you want to go wash your hands again. We're also seeing more studies coming out showing that if you're using cell phones, tablets, and other sort of devices, they can carry germs, and we know that they can contaminate other surfaces as well. So you might want to think about, if you don't already, certain policies around cell phone or tablet uses. Another thing too is a volunteer or employee's health status. If someone is sick, maybe having other tasks that they can work with that aren't going to be directly handling food if sending them home isn't an option. So example of tasks where they're not necessarily handling food could be looking outside the facility around the perimeter. So maybe looking for environmental hazards that could lead to pest or rodent infestation, some things of that nature. So clean. We're very familiar with cleaning our hands as well as surfaces often. when we are thinking about hand washing, it's knowing those situations you want people to wash your hands. Some of the ones that people can sometimes forget is washing your hands before putting on gloves. Hopefully, if there's any facilities outside where you're trying to keep the area clean, so maybe you're helping the neighborhood clean up animal waste or anything like that, you'd be wanting to wash your hands. There might be situations where employees are handling garbage, changing tasks. So maybe it could be unloading a receiving area to prepping, making sure they wash their hands, having signage if it helps remind them to wash their hands at certain situations. And always verbal reminders is helpful too. We know that when people are washing their hands, you really want to make sure you dry your hands really well. The photo on the left is using, well, both photos, you can see that they're using Glow Germ. Glow Germ is something that you can use that fluoresces under UV light and can be used to be pretend germs to help give people a really strong visualization of how easy cross-contamination or cross-contact can be with pathogens or allergens. So here in the photo on the left, we had someone wash their hands, but we had them do a really poor job of drying them. So you can see that even though they washed their hands were still slightly wet. And when they touched the wall, they were able to get any remaining germs on their hands on the wall. So again, making sure that volunteers and employees are washing their hands as well as maintaining other personal hygiene up to your operations standards. One of the things that they have from the university or Oregon State University is something called high-speed hand washing. So the idea with high-speed hand washing, as you can see in the poster, it's meant to be a method to help save time. We know that you're lathering your hands around your wrist and between your fingers, front and back of your hand for 20 seconds. And so the idea is that you're rotating people through the line to wet and get soap on their hand. And then while people are rotating through, they're at least getting a good 20 seconds, if not more, of hand lathering before they go and rinse their hands. So the idea is that you don't have that one person in front of the sink for 20 plus seconds. It's that constant rotation to help save some time. Other things too, when you're thinking about cleaning, is you might want to write a sanitation standard operating procedures or SSOPs. These are just nice instructions that volunteers or employees can follow for a certain task. So this one here is just an SSOP for making sure pH sanitizer is at the right level. Or rather, the pH is at the right level. And you can see that not only can you use written text like in the photo on the right, but you can also use pictures. And pictures are really helpful because if you have volunteers that are monitoring your chlorine levels or other sanitizers, having that visual of what the correct color should look like for the right level can be super useful. The USDA has some other nice infographics that you could either print out on your own or order that are good reminders about certain food safety behaviors that you want to uphold in certain areas of your operation. So this, it's still going on, but here I just wanted to kind of highlight the importance of the food supply chain. So Family Dollar, they were recently subpoenaed and they were found to have over 1,000 dead rats in their storage facility. The company did not exclude pests from its food plant to protect against contamination of food. Other things that I wanted to highlight here was that significant gnawing and the strong odor of rodent urine on pallets of mixed nuts were also documented. Grounds around the facility were not in a condition to protect against contamination of food. Rubber seals around piping and wiring had holes. The building were not in a clean and sanitary condition. So even though a lot of times with food safety, we're extremely focused of what people are doing, you really want to think about the facility as a whole as well, just because with all the receiving, transportation of food coming out, you want to make sure that we're really excluding any possible pests and rodents. In terms of the supply chain, some key steps that might be helpful are making sure that you're getting food from an approved supplier. So an example is if you're receiving fresh produce from a local farm, you might want to ask if that farm is GAP certified or Good Agricultural Practice certified. It's a voluntary audit, and it just highlights that that farm, they have a food safety plan, so they're doing everything within their means to make sure they're mitigating foodborne risks around water, animals, worker hygiene, and waste if they're using certain types of fertilizer. If you're someone that might be getting food from a larger grocery chain, you might be able to ask for certain documentations that help support that the food that you're receiving is in good condition, and then always having an organized method to document and record where you're getting this food from in case there was a recall. Again, just to highlight, there's a lot of good infographic posters that you could download and print from the CDC. So that rodent infestation at Family Dollar, we saw that that one infestation at one warehouse started to trickle down and affect other businesses and organizations. So here we see that Dollar Tree had to do a huge recall due to the warehouse issues from Family Dollar. And we can see here in terms of the pest infestation that there was over 1,000 dead rodents. And we know, again, pests can carry diseases. If you're thinking of your facility, you might be able to identify and prioritize certain hazards. So different ways that you could do that is to kind of construct a rough blueprint like you see on the right image. And from there, you might be able to construct areas where you want more hygienic behaviors going on with workers and employees compared to others. So if you have office suites, you probably don't need a whole lot of hygienic practices because food isn't being handled or stored in that area. If you have an assembly area where you're packaging or preparing foods, you probably would color code it something different like you see here, just to alert volunteers and workers that they should be upping their safe food handling behaviors. And you can see on the photo on the left, this is just a storage warehouse, and all that green is cross-contamination occurring. So again, the one on the left, similar to the photo on the right, is just helping you visualize the flow of food within your facility, as well as helping you kind of visualize the flow of people. So you can hopefully find areas where you want to make sure you have some good food safety protocols in place. So cleaning versus sanitizing. We see a lot that people think cleaning and sanitizing are the same process, but they're not. I like to think of cleaning and sanitizing in a pyramid where cleaning is going to be something that everyone does. Cleaning helps remove anything visible. When you clean, it's typically with soap and water. And when you do clean, you're not killing any pathogens of public health concern. What you need to help kill some pathogens of public health concern is a sanitizer. We highly recommend that you read the manufacturer's instructions for use and storage. And the sanitizer is going to be what helps kill some of these pathogens that you don't want in your facility. Typically, when you're addressing food, cleaning and sanitizing are the two steps that you really need to focus on. Other steps in terms of sanitation would be disinfecting. And disinfecting is typically just a stronger version of a sanitizer. But again, for food purposes, cleaning and sanitizing is what you want to do. Typically, you'll clean a surface before you sanitize it. And again, you definitely want to make sure you read the instructions of the sanitizer to make sure you're carrying out the activities in the right order for maximum efficiency. I will also point out, if you do visit North Carolina State University's food safety website or Safe Plates, they have a lot of nice little infographics and social media posts that could be helpful. Looking at transportation, again, I talked about making sure that folks that are carrying out transportation, food delivery activities have the time, they have the equipment, and understand how else their vehicle, if they're using personal vehicles, are used prior to transporting food, right? You don't want, in a worst case scenario, someone that has a truck, for example, that might be delivering chemicals. You don't know if those chemicals slosh around in the bed of the truck and then come from delivering chemicals for their job to the food bank and package food to be delivered out, just because you might have some chemical hazard risk between the two. So making sure if volunteers are using their own personal vehicles, that they know how to hopefully mitigate some hazards from physical, chemical, and biological when transporting food out. So there could be a cleaning schedule. There might be troubleshooting things of like, hey, I would really need a thermometer so I can make sure temperature abuse isn't occurring, or even some of the special blankets to help keep cold foods cold or hot foods hot. For receiving foods, again, it's a great opportunity to have the I spy mentality of making sure volunteers or employees are really looking at cans, boxes, packaging to make sure they're not dented, damaged in a way that could mean that there could be some food safety issues. Some different ways, not only visually, but even again, possibly creating a flow chart to kind of see where you're receiving food, storing it, and how it's being handled throughout your facility. For curbside pickup, again, you would want to think about the amount of time. Can food stay hot or cold for the allotted amount of time that is food safe? Do you have appropriate staffing? So if you need people to run in and out to get equipment or food, they can do so pretty easily. And then also thinking not only with the flow of food, the equipment that you might be bringing food out. If you're using roller carts, are there any concern about cleaning and sanitizing the wheels that the roller carts are coming in on from time to time as you see fit? Again, even thinking about the flow of traffic so there isn't delays in pickup, and even having hand sanitizer if people are not physically getting their hands soiled. So again, when you're thinking about food safety, hopefully you're thinking about mitigating or eliminating full risks. We know that biological hazards, especially foodborne bacteria like E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria. They're all going to have a certain happy environment that they want to grow. And it's our job to make sure we're not giving those pieces to them to grow quickly. When we're thinking about supply chain, are there ways that we can make sure that the food coming in is being received or has been previously held under good food safety practices, whether it's making sure cold foods are keeping within that cold chain or hot foods within that hot chain of supplies. Again, we're dirtier than we think. So just telling people, we know that you're clean, but again, just for our operation, we know that food's going out to people that can get sick really easily. So we're just upping our game, either for hand washing or hair care, jewelry wearing, or what our policies are with cell phones. With food safety, it's a game of I Spy. So even looking at really, basic equipment at a different angle can help highlight where food safety could be an issue. So here on the right, you see a table that's obviously movable because it's on rollers, and in between those wheels is peanut butter. So you might be thinking, oh gosh, if you push that table from one room to the other, is that peanut butter going to stay on that wheel? Is it going to fall off into another room? Is that going to cause a cross contact situation that you don't want? Or is that peanut butter going to be something that's going to attract rodents and pests? So keeping things clean and sanitized when possible. One thing to note when you do think about clean and allergens, that's a perfect pairing. You're not able to sanitize an allergen. You can sanitize or kill certain pathogens with the right sanitizer. Some resources I wanted to highlight was FDA's e-publication. If you go here, you can actually order fact sheets, you can order other infographics in multiple languages, so you don't have to bear the cost of printing. Other resources that you might turn to is FDA's food code. It's typically updated every 2 years. You might be looking at industry magazines or resources. ServSafe Food Handler Guide for food banking. Other unique areas is a podcast called Risky or Not, which is sponsored by 2 extension specialists that cover a range of topics, or you could submit your own. FDA's Bad Bug Book does a nice overview about certain pathogens and some of their risk factors. And then we also, with the International Association for Food Protection, we do have a free webinar coming up next Wednesday that's going to discuss food safety training. So there might be certain nuggets that are applicable for you and your operation. Other fun resources to help explain food safety or hygiene is New Mexico State University's Cooperative Extension. They have a learning lab, and you can see here that they have a slew of topics, not so much the Night of the Living Dead, but they do have a slew of topics that are videos, animations, or games that can help teach and train food safety. Again, FoodKeeper, you can download it for your device, and it'll help give you that time frame to how long you can keep foods refrigerated, cooking temperatures. That might be useful. And then another website is something called Eat or Toss. They're based out of Northern Virginia, so not too far. And that website, they can kind of help troubleshoot, should something be tossed, or is it still good to eat? Again, there's a lot of resources out there. Hopefully I can be one of them. If not, there's still USDA. You have Ask USDA and the Partnership for Food Safety Education. So I guess with that, we'll jump to questions. Let me end my screen since we didn't get to the game.
So if anyone has questions for Shauna, you can drop them in the chat or take yourself off mute. We have a few more minutes at the end for any questions. This was so incredibly informative, and I've been keeping my eye on the chat, and it looks like everyone is very appreciative and everyone has learned quite a bit. So again, feel free to drop that in the chat or take yourself off mute.
And I'm happy to, you sat through the presentation next week or next month or next year, you have a question about food safety or how to maybe better train, or if there's other resources out there, I'd be more than happy to help troubleshoot some of your issues. Some of the other things in terms of food safety that I think gives me a good lens of the whole food supply chain in terms of food safety is I am involved with farm worker produce training from the Food Safety Modernization Act for produce safety, as well as GAPS. I'm a ServSafe Proctor instructor. Consumer food safety is really my bread and butter. And then at the manufacturing level, I am a lead instructor for FSMA's preventive controls for human food. So
A
Hi,
wealth of
Shauna.
information. Mhm.
I'm sorry, Julia, it's Deborah. While I realize that volunteers are very much needed to carry out work at food distribution sites and their time on site is limited, once we're past curbside pickups, as Shauna mentioned, it is really critical to have the short, simple trainings coupled with the refreshers on an ongoing basis. And my second note here is really a question for you, Shauna. With Prince George's SNAP-Ed expanding their work, myself, Gabriella, and Madeline to during the pandemic to work with community-based pantries, I learned that refrigeration is something that is an ongoing challenge. How can we address that?
So Deborah, challenges in what way? Is it lack of refrigeration?
Exactly. The lack of funding, the lack of refrigeration, partnering with other sites. So because they have refrigeration and they're kind enough to share a space, but then there are others who do not have those resources available.
I wonder if there's small community grants that might be available to help with some of the lack of resources. I know adequate resources is always a concern for a lot of different areas. Grants is the best thing I can think of. Other items, and feel free if people have better ideas than what I have. There might be refurbished refrigerators or even restaurant auctions, some of those things that might be short-term solutions compared to having like the ideal walk-in refrigerator unit.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Campbell. I was going to address that for those excellent presentation, by the way. We've done a lot in the past year, and I'm sure Julia and others will share to deal with the refrigeration issue around the county. In South County, we have two 53 square foot trailers, as well as additional refrigeration units that we bought for our Temple Hills location. So that gives us access, or other organizations, even smaller organizations, access to refrigeration. So we are addressing that issue.
Thanks for sharing that, Pastor Campbell. And I'll just echo everything that's been said. We do know refrigeration has been a challenge. The Food Equity Council has worked with a few community partners, including Pastor Campbell and Carla, to help bring more refrigerated space to some of your sites. But we know that it's not enough. So hopefully there'll be more grant opportunities, but we do have kind of a template for how we, help with those projects. So hopefully we can continue to model that and bring additional cold storage space to those sites that need it. Sydney, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to thank you for your presentation, Shauna. I did want to follow up on the cold storage trailer discussion and mention that those are sometimes shared spaces where, you know, food's coming in from different sources and multiple partners are sharing those spaces. So it would be really helpful if you have any guidance on best practices for keeping, you know, a unit like that as food safe as possible. And my other question was more practical. You had some really great resources and screenshots in your presentation that I think our providers would love to use, like flow charts and things. Can we get those after the training?
Yeah, we can talk on like what best format, right? I know I had the screenshot, but that's not as helpful as actually having the template. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk more on that. In terms of like using a shared refrigerator unit, communication is always going to be key, right? Is there some sort of schedule, record keeping to say, hey, this week we're going to work on it. Next month, it's you that's cleaning, sanitizing every week or month, or how you all see fit based on what's being stored, just to keep the due diligence up. Another thing too that might be useful, especially with temperature and during the Maryland summers, you could, if you don't already, start looking at Bluetooth wireless temperature monitors. I know that some of the public school systems are already using them, but the thought of a power outage or someone just didn't close the door to the fridge well enough and everything you and someone else has is money down the drain. So those might be fairly cheap because technology costs are coming down, to have people not worry about, oh, is so-and-so going to keep the refrigerator shut, right? We deal with that at home. So at least you would know if an issue arose or prevent it from turning into a bigger issue.
Thank you. So I know we only have 1 minute left and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So on behalf of everyone here, a huge thank you for joining us and sharing this presentation. We will be sure to get you information. I know everyone's been asking for the slides. We'll share the slides, the notes, the recording, and then we'll work on figuring out kind of a system and to get those kind of infographics and other resources out to you. So please stay tuned. And I know there were questions about kind of some kind of documentation that you participated. So I will also follow up with the folks that requested that to see if we can get you something. So please stay tuned. I will send you all an email, multiple emails probably, with all of this information. So huge thanks for everyone for joining us today. I know we have some community announcements listed in the agenda, so I'm not going to go over those right now, but just please take a look at those. Some events and opportunities are listed there, so take a look at that, and we'll also send that out again via email. And then again, our call schedule is a bit funky in May, but we'll have the May 9th call joined with Montgomery County Food Council. And then we'll also have this informal discussion during our usual call time on May 5th. So again, we'll send that all to you. So please keep your eyes out for that. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in May.
Julia.
Hey, Carla.
Hey, guess what's so funny? Today, you know, we did the food certification training, and we all got our certification certificates from the Restaurant Association today, right before this call.
Oh, that's great. Good for you guys. Awesome.
So this was all old news to you. You knew everything.
Oh, no, it actually added more value to it. Like, it definitely added value. And then you had a lot of information that would be really helpful, especially at the food hubs and the food pantries, so that they could just, you know, post them.
Yeah, and I think too, since I know Deborah was the one that connected me to Julia, maybe there's something like some sort of needs assessment so we can figure out what the general population, whether it's employees or volunteers, would like or need to know, just to kind of help share the resources.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, we could, in our kind of follow-up email and notes, we could put together like a brief little survey to hear, yeah, what those needs are, and then figure out some next steps from there.
Yeah.
It'll be helpful, Julia, if, because we're getting ready to do this upcoming training, for the food hubs. If we had the presentation, then maybe you and I and Sydney could go through it and see what would be beneficial, and then we could also add the survey part to it after we see. Because, this would be very helpful to what we get ready to do.
Yeah, that would be great. Cool.
MAPRAC is on board for us to, for that training.
Okay, let's follow up offline and chat some more, but that would be great.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. It was really, really informative.
Thanks.
Mhm.
It's a lot of good stuff. I really love food safety. So, I mean, if there's more questions or resources that I don't address with a follow-up, just let me know.
Yeah, we will share that information with the organizations, mainly the faith-based organizations that are part of our network too, for them to be in the know. This is a way to, to protect the health of people as well, right? Thank you.
Thank you so
You're
much for
welcome.
being here.
Yeah,
Okay,
so Julie and Sydney, for the slides, I'm trying to think, like, obviously the resources are helpful. Are there ways in the past that you've shared previous presentations, so it's like the content, but then actually a quick and dirty, like, this is how you get to there too?
What,
Like, should I just hyperlink things like crazy? Or
honestly, that might be good. Something that we've done in the past has had like kind of like cheat sheets almost, for like, for instance, buying locally grown foods. We have like a cheat sheet on that. So something like that might be possible. And in fact,